Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis, to the Praise of Folly podcast. I am once again joined by Rain. Glad to have you back, Rain.
Glad to be here.
We are here to discuss I think it's the second part of our series on how technology has changed warfare. And today's episode will be about next generation Chinese sea power. So without further ado, I hand the reins to you, Rain.
Yeah, glad to be here. So like a couple months ago, we discussed was like sixth generation air warfare, by using what China is doing. So this episode will be kind of similar, but we are gonna focus more on the Navy, like what's the next generation Navy gonna look like and shore defense gonna look like, and I'm gonna focus more on what the kind of ships that the Chinese Navy is using, but I will assume that like US or Russia will probably gonna use something similar but different, but quite similar as well. So the layout of this video, and the first I like to cover is the shore defense, because not I realized that not many video online that explain military stuff has really covered like how much shore defense had changed in the last 20 years. So we're gonna cover shore defense. Then I'm gonna explain the capital the future capital ships, and we're gonna discuss a bit how like future fleet gonna look like. So that's the outline basically.
Okay, that sounds great. So shore defense.
Yeah. So in terms of shore defense, a lot of I think many people have heard of the hypersonic missile that China used to defend against the 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 U.S. Navy and its shore, which, for example, in the video here, which DF-26 that can hit a moving ship and has a range of 4,000 kilometers. But I feel like a big part of shore defense that has been undercovered was actually how powerful a land-based air force is against the Navy. You can change the next slide. Yeah, basically, a lot of people think that hypersonic missile is what kills Navy, but in reality, what really destroys the Navy that coming onto land is actually those bombers with massive amount of missiles that can completely saturate the defense of a fleet, and they will be escorted by land-based fighters who are generally superior to naval fighters. So can go to the next page. So here I put in the table, like just give an idea, like how much missiles a bombing fleet can deliver against a naval fleet. Like I put in the two column of US, China, and Russia, like how much like regular cruise missiles they can deliver in the opening strike within the first days, and the second column is the sustained number. And if you compare to how much like regular supersonic missiles that they take to saturate the defense of a carrier group, basically like a well set up air force can basically wipe out one or two carrier group per day. So that's actually I personally think that the presence of a strategic bomber with missiles is actually a bigger deterrent to a navy than hypersonic missile, because hypersonic missile they're expensive. Sure, they are very powerful, but you cannot just keep using them. But a bombing fleet escorted by fighters with many armed with a lot of long range regular missiles will absolutely destroy any navy.
So a question here: when you have the second column, sustained daily, that's of course after Ukraine had started, so Russia's stocks are depleted. Would you agree that the numbers for the U.S. and China would also go down on sustained daily if they were to engage in a hot conflict?
I would say that they will also decrease. I would say like sustained daily is assuming that nothing get hit into their mainland. Basically, if just a fleet come into the shore of either China, US, or Russia, that would be the amount of long-range Tomahawk equivalent that the US, Chinese, and Russia Air Force will be able to deliver per day.
Okay, the other thing that's I think interesting here is this trend that you're observing with strategic bombers in the munitions and their ability to target fleets. This broader trend that we're witnessing now arguably began in World War II, where in 1941, German airborne forces captured Crete, which was an island, and the British had complete naval supremacy. So what that meant was German air power was able to lock down the island to ensure that they could take it.
Excuse me, you were saying? I didn't fully.
No. The point that I'm saying is that the German invasion of Crete in 1941 is, I think, the first illustration of this principle, where with just air power, they locked down an island and took it, even though the British had naval superiority.
Yeah, at the midway as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, I feel like with all the talk of hypersonic missile, we kind of missed the fact that like the real predator of the Navy is actually an Air Force.
Well, the other interesting thing in Tom Clancy's novel Red Storm Rising, he takes that into account. The Soviets in his hypothetical Third World War used backfire bombers to launch strikes at NATO shipping.
Yeah, and also I would add a point that those you actually to do that against Navy, you actually don't need those high-end stealth bomber like the B-2, because the missile that bombers can carry are so big that they basically shoot it like 1,000 or 2,000 kilometers away. So basically, they are never in range of a carrier airfleet, and if they venture further, they will be escorted by the land-based fighter. So it's actually not even a very high tech solution, basically.
Yeah. Next slide.
Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So this slide, I just want to illustrate like how much a danger a naval fleet is versus land. We don't need to go into the very big detail, but I just changed into the short, medium, intermediate, and long range. Basically, in the short range is basically like the range of in the short missile or SAMs. Basically, you don't want any ship in that range is basically dead. But that range is also like within range that you can blockade a land. So realistically, you're never gonna put your Navy here. But the most interesting is actually the medium and intermediate range, where the medium is basically a bomber can launch a missile from inland and still hit a ship, and intermediate is if it's escorted by fighter and then launch a missile. So when you notice that medium is 2,000 kilometers and intermediate is 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers, at that range, I feel like the traditional naval strategy of like blockade doesn't really apply anymore, because like the range has become so big. Because in the past, like the age of the cannons, the short defense is like 10, 20 kilometers. But now when your Air Force can basically defend your coast up to 3,000-4,000 kilometers, I just feel like that kind of changed a lot of naval strategy.
Yeah. So would you agree with this summary? The missile defenses that China has are more for area denial, and then the bomber fleets are more for targeted strikes on enemy fleets.
Yes, against fleet and against island. This is also the reason why I feel like the island chain strategy doesn't work anymore, because in the past you kind of need to drive your navy against the island bases, but now the bomber can just take off, just launch hundreds of missiles against the island base, which are not easy to supply, and the island base basically become, instead of a staging point, they kind of become like a one-time defense position.
Yeah.
Single use.
Yeah.
This is why I say like land aviation beat naval aviation, and land beat island beats ship. And this is why I like to say a bit like what I often hear about Chinese naval strategy. Basically, is just to complement what you said earlier. The Chinese hypersonic missile and the Air Force is basically there to keep the US outside of the West Pacific. Once that happened, China can use its navy to basically concentrate in the Indian Ocean to defend its supply line. And if the Chinese Air Force and missile force could keep the carrier out, like the West Pacific, basically the US, if they want to engage the Chinese Navy in the Indian Ocean, they either have to go under Australia or from Africa, which actually make the supply line of Chinese Navy shorter. That's why you also see like most of the Chinese Navy, their paint is actually made for hotter water like the Indian Ocean. So this is just like a gist in the Chinese naval strategy, basically.
So when you say land aviation beats naval aviation, that could mean a couple of things. Do you mean that there's that land because you have a land-based fighter slash bomber, they can be larger, i.e., more payload than a carrier ship or carrier plane? Is that, or it could mean that the carrier is more vulnerable than an airfield, or it can mean both.
It means both because first carrier is much more vulnerable, and also carrier fighter has to make a compromise in its aerodynamic design because for carrier fighter they need to have good performance at low speed in order to take off to have good control in takeoff and land. But to have good performance at low speed, you're sacrificing your high speed performance. And what is most important in the current age of fighter is to have good supersonic maneuverability. And land fighter doesn't have to worry about that. So that way, like all things being equals, a land fighter will always have the advantage over a naval fighter.
And to your second point, land beats islands beats ships. You can't sink an island, but you can sink a ship. I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, you can sink a ship, and the island is like you can also wipe everything out from the island and wipe out all the infrastructure, and the island can no longer be supplied. But for example, an airport from the mainland, they can be like repaired very easily. You cannot just blockade like something inland.
Yes.
So that was basically a gist of like a naval of a overview of the shore defense, just so that we can get into like where the future ship will venture, so to speak. So basically outside of the reach of land air force, basically in the middle of the Pacific, Indian Ocean, etc. So when talking about the next generation ship, since we want to keep the video not too long, I'm mostly gonna focus on the capital ships, which with the rise of new technology, we have like two categories. Like one is I like to call like missile battleships, and the next is the future carriers, the different type of carriers. So this is just some image that I find online. They are not really the real images. Yeah. So one thing that we notice is that I noticed a lot of naval engagement is a lot about range. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think the main reason why carrier beats battleship is that the carrier have a much bigger range than a battleship.
Yes. Briefly, the first naval battle in which two fleets did not have eye contact was the Battle of the Coral Sea, where Japanese and American carrier fighters and bombers were sent to attack each other. It was beyond the line of sight. Yes.
Yeah, but that's what I thought as well. But what we noticed with advance in technology, I would say like even during if you can see like even during the Cold War era, the carrier has the advantage in reach. But recently, and in the foreseeable future, there will be a much more of a parity in the strike range of cruiser with missiles, with hypersonic missile, and a carrier. So the carrier's range advantage doesn't really apply anymore in the foreseeable future.
Because the missile outranges the fighter in a way similar to the fighter outranging the battleship gun.
Yes, but if for equal tech level, I would say like it's more like a parity, because like longer range missile, you're forcing the carrier to carry fighter with longer range. So it's kind of a cat and mouse thing. So I would say like in the future they will have like a parity, because nobody is stupid enough to build something like under range, because they can upgrade their stuff.
Yeah.
So an example that I like to give to give an idea like what a future ship will looks like. This is the type 55 destroyer that the China used. This is basically the main ship of the fleet in the Chinese Navy, and this is considered by many as a so-called pre-dreadnought ship of the modern era because it has many features that indicate what direction is going, but it's not quite there yet. For example, it's quite big. It's like 13,000 tons. It's had, oh, actually, I made a mistake. It's 100. The number of VLS cell, I actually made a mistake. It's 112, I think, the launch cell, the VLS. It has ASAR radar, have like hypersonic missile with very long range. It has a very long-ranged SAMs, which is for SAMs. I always give two numbers because anti-air missile you can either shoot directly at the target or you can shoot as a curved ballistic trajectory. They both have advantages and disadvantages, but generally, if you go a ballistic trajectory, it has bigger range, which I indicate 300 or 500 kilometers. So it must have like the ability to also shoot down ballistic and hypersonic missiles and satellites, which it has, but it doesn't have a real gun or energy weapon yet. So it's kind of getting there, but not quite.
So it sounds like you're saying there's a trade-off with the two munitions. One is either long range but predictable flight path. The other one is shorter range but an unpredictable flight path.
Oh no, it's not too different. It's the same missile, but you can choose two flight paths, but each one has trade-off.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, but in the future, as you can see in the image, there will be something more advanced, which I assume you can go to the next slide. You can go back. Sorry. Yeah, which is a much more of that I would call a proper missile battleship. You will have around the size of a Kirov battle cruiser. I have much more advanced missiles. So the next slide is actually some recent development because as you may not know, actually tomorrow in China is actually the celebration of the 80th year of the end of World War II. And because there's a military parade and have revealed a few new weapons that are already in service but not revealed yet. So as you can see, those are the VLSL, and there are three very interesting new missiles that got revealed: the YJ-17, 19, and 20. Can go to the next slide. So those will be basically the main weapon of a missile, the future missile destroyer or missile battleship is basically the hypersonic missiles. What hypersonic missile is good is that it has very long range and very hard to intercept. So those three, they each have different niches, but since they are just revealed, I don't know which one is optimized for what yet. But all that I can say is like we know that YJ-17 is basically a ship-based version of the F-17, and I will estimate its range at 1,800 kilometers, which outrange most carrier now. And the YJ-19 is basically a Zircon equivalent, and the YJ-20, which we talked before in a previous video. Yeah, but besides hypersonic missiles, those missile ships, they will not be only operated with hypersonic missiles. The hypersonic missile also have downside is that they are expensive. Although also, even though they have like good range and hard to intercept, they actually doesn't do well at short range because they have to fly high and accelerate into hypersonic speed. And before that, they're actually quite easy to shut down. So for short range, typically a ship are equipped with a supersonic missile to hit something within like a few hundred kilometers quickly, or they also armed with a stealth missile, which you can see YJ-18C, that sneak upon the enemy ships when they are busy defending against hypersonic missiles. So those are like the main offensive weapon of a missile ship. Of course, there is also another interesting weapon that future ship will have are the electromagnetic weapon and energy weapon. A lot of people think that railgun will bring back the age of battleship, but the range of the railgun are still quite short. They don't have like 1,000, 2,000 kilometer range. They're actually just a couple hundred kilometers, but they're actually good replacement for the deck gun and the seaways of ships. And there's something that many people doesn't know is that the deck gun of most modern ship also serve as a flak gun against a slower moving target. It basically serves as like a midway between the short range SAM and the close-in weapon system of ships. And as for lasers, there is also a misconception of lasers. Is like we think that lasers, since it's at light speed, it would be good against hypersonic missiles. But in reality, the hypersonic missile, in order to survive flying in the atmosphere at Mach 5 or Mach 10, they're actually extremely sturdy. So you're not going to shut them down with laser, especially considering that lasers are very short ranged. So lasers are actually the best weapon against a swarm of drones. So this is just like some overview on the direct energy weapons.
So before we move on, with the idea of lasers as anti-drone weapons, is the idea that you have like a single beam and then you split it into smaller independent ones?
No, it's more like they can shoot one target and switch target very fast, and they don't really run out of ammunition as fast, because so long that the ship continues to supply power, it can keep shooting. But for the deck, your gun and the seaways, they actually run out of ammo very quickly. So they only have ammo to defend against 2-3 missiles, and that's it. So
now, does the laser have a chance of like overheating? Do you have to like turn it off so it doesn't melt?
Against what kind of target?
Well, no, I mean like sustained use, like unless the barrel is like protected by some sort of heat resistant materials.
No, yeah, actually, the advantage of one of the big advantage laser is that it has a very good sustained use. So you can have like 100 suicide drone against your ship, and your laser can just keep shooting at them. And there is also different. When I say lasers, I should also add like other energy weapons. They're also microwave weapon. Like those energy weapons, they're actually much better against a large number of small targets.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and since we cover against like the offense, the missiles, and the direct fire weapon, I also like to cover slightly about the SAMs. Currently, the way that SAMs work is like there's typically 3 layers of SAMs: long range, mid range, and short range, which I indicate here. And ships are also expected to have weapons that you can use to target against ballistic missiles and satellites. I would say that in the future, the main improvement of those SAMs is basically better range and the better ability to shut down hypersonic missiles. Because as of right now, it takes like, I would say, at least 3 SAMs to have a reasonable, not like acceptable chance to shoot one hypersonic missile, and those are basically special SAMs which will end up costing more than the hypersonic missile that is shooting at you. So it's not very sustainable defense.
With air defense, do you see the possibility that lasers get dragooned into that role? Because I could see them being effective against hypersonic missiles.
I don't think so. Like I covered earlier, one of the I think I didn't mention earlier, but one of the another big weakness of lasers is that in atmosphere they have very short range. So they only have like 1 or 2 kilometers of range, and at that range, not only a hypersonic missile very resistant because they have to fly at very high speed under very high friction and heat. Even you shut it down with lasers, you can only shut it down at like 1 or 2 kilometers away, but they are going so fast that even if you shut it, they're going to hit you anyway.
All right. One last question then. What if you had aerial-borne lasers with aircraft that were flying off carrier decks as a sort of like aerial escort against incoming missiles?
Uh, this will work. This will work, but it's still gonna take a bit to shut down one hypersonic missile because, like I said, they are shielded to fly at Mach 5 to Mach 10, which mean like they're actually they are not fragile like aircraft. I would say like laser are much better against softer target, like a cruise missile or a drone, or even a fighter jet. But in
Right.
space, laser have infinite range, well, near infinite range. But in atmosphere, not so much.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. So basically, here I just put a comparison table and what basically a future battleship going to look like. We covered a bit earlier. Basically, I just compiled what we got here in a table. So basically, a Kirov-sized ship with modern radar and modern missiles, and armed with laser with railguns and energy weapons. And something that I haven't mentioned here. They also can serve as like a sensor node of the fleet. Basically, they process and coordinate the different ships within the fleet. So they will also play like a command role. So if you want to visualize how the future battleship looks like.
Okay.
Yeah. So now since we covered the battleship, I'd like to cover carriers. I know that there's a lot of saying online that with the rise of hypersonic missile, carrier are obsolete. But in reality, I don't think so because your land force need air cover no matter what. Same thing is for the Navy. Even with hypersonic missiles, your fleet still need air cover. So because of that, the carrier are actually not going to be obsolete for the foreseeable future because you're always going to need the air force with you when you go to war.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the future carriers, so I actually like to differentiate. I feel like with the future carrier is likely to split into two groups: the silver carriers, and there will be a comeback of the escort carriers. So before we go into carrier, I'd just like to give you like a overview, like a recap of the sixth generation Air Force. Basically, in the sixth generation Air Force is land is like manned platform commanding a large number of unmanned platform. You can change slide. But one thing that gonna affect the carrier is like one for the manned platform to act as an effective air commander, the sixth generation fighter are actually bigger. As you can see here, you can see the size comparison of the Chinese sixth generation carrier fighter versus F-15 and the flanker, which is quite much bigger. And the manned fighter are bigger, and there is also but there will also be a much greater number of unmanned fighters. And they are also very cheap, and they rely on large numbers. To just give you an idea, like Loyal Wingman, the fighters that fight with the manned fighter, they will cost around that of an F-16, which is not that expensive if you compare to carrier fighters and even fifth generation fighter. And as for UAV, I mean the aircraft that just carry ammunition and strike certain target. As of now, their cost adjusted for inflation and capability is actually quite comparable to Second World War bombers, and they can be deployed in a very large quantity. For example, the image underneath, go back, which I think I mentioned to you earlier, is called the Twin Scorpion UAV, and they are, for example, if you adjust the affiliation, they have the cost and capacity of B-26. Just give you an idea how cheap those UAV are. So now that we cover like the change in the air wing composition with the sixth generation, my theory is that we will still have super carriers, and they will not get smaller, but they will get slightly bigger, but not much more expensive, because what costs the most in a carrier is actually not the size still are not expensive, but they will get slightly bigger to accommodate to have the facility to support those sixth generation fighters, and they will stay out of range of hypersonic missiles because they are still like a very valuable target, and they will become much more like in a much more supporting role to act like a mobile airfield.
Yeah.
But because of the large number of drone and UAV, I think in the near future we're going to see a rise of escort carriers like this one in the image below. This one is actually getting built in China, and as you can see, it's very simple. There is no catapult, nothing, and you can just act like a platform for UAV. And those ships, you can put it in front, you can risk them.
Okay, so just to be clear, what you're saying is that the larger carriers will support the manned sixth generation fighters, and the escort carriers will support the loyal wingman drones.
Yes, because because that way you can have those carrier closer to the front. You can afford to lose them, and even if you lose them, they will just be like a small amount of crew, and what you're losing is just a bunch of unmanned aircraft. Well, if you lose a super carrier, you're not losing a bigger crew. You're also losing many sixth generation fighter, which is also very expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, from what I saw in the development of recent ship, I would like to split the escort carrier into two categories. First is the escort carrier, where they are very minimal features. They are basically just a flat top for you to take off and land those unmanned aircraft and rearm them. And they will, I will guess, cost even less than a frigate because you don't need to put many stuff in it, just a flat top. And on a higher end, there will be something like an assault carrier. I didn't come up with this term. There's another YouTuber that came up with this. I think it's called like Australian Naval Analyst or something like that. Basically, this is like a step up. They will either have like one catapult or a ramp. They will still mainly carry the UAVs, but they will also be able to service the sixth generation manned fighter when need be. And they're kind of the midway between, but they will still be like cost only maybe 1/5 to 1/10 of a super carrier. So they are still something that you can afford to lose. And go ahead.
Oh no, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I also say like they will also likely play a role of carrying those unmanned boat and other like unmanned surface platforms. Yeah.
Yes. So it sounds like what you're saying is what different, even though the escort carrier and the assault carrier, quote unquote, the same class of ships, the assault carrier has more equipment for assisting amphibious operations.
Yes, and they can do amphibious operations, but what they carry, but it depends on what they carry. For example, they could, if they do more fleet support, they will carry like unmanned ship that will like go forward as like a scouting. So because what they will have likely the Chinese approach is the Type 76, which they gave it a well deck. You can either carry landing force or you can carry like unmanned ships to assist the fleet. So basically, is a quite versatile ship, and it's cheap enough for you to lose them, that you can lose them.
Okay.
Yeah, which coming to this slide, I would say those would be kind of the ships that an assault carrier will carry. So either like it can be like a small ship or suicide boat, unmanned submarine, or even the blue thing and the right down corner is actually is actually not a missile. It's actually a drone. It's like a I don't know how to pronounce it. You know, AQ plane.
What kind of plane?
You know the later Soviet, they built something that used like the surface effect, and they fly very close to the surface.
Oh yeah, that's the acronoplon.
Yeah, basically those are the four type of ship they either carry or they assist. Because one of the things that differentiate between like unmanned ships and unmanned aircraft is basically aircraft fly very fast. So basically, you take off, you do a mission, you fly for like a day, and you can come back. But for ship, you cannot really do that because you have to stay out there for like several months. So unmanned ship are actually never acting on their own. So you have to accompany a fleet. And basically, those they either scout or they carry some missiles, or for example, or they can become like a gunboat that you can use to against like lower tech target. So in addition to the capital ship, the drones, those unmanned ship will be like another big addition to the fleet of the future.
Okay, we have a question for you, Rain, from Record Deepness. He says, so these escort / assault carriers would be more similar to floatplane / submarine tender in terms of footprint?
I don't fully understand I didn't fully understand the question.
Yeah, I don't really either. So if you
In terms of what do you mean by footprint? Maybe you can.
Yeah, well, yeah. What do you mean by footprint, Record Deepness? Comment in the chat, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, yeah. So that's basically it. We can let him. So I actually didn't fully finish the presentation because I got like really busy with work in the last couple of months. But one thing that I actually is to like speculate a bit like how a future fleet composition going to look like. Generally, what I would speculate is that each capital ship, what I consider a capital ship, is like a super carrier, like a missile battleship, or like an assault carrier. They will likely be accompanied with at least like one destroyer and one frigate, and maybe one submarine. And you can like do combination with this. That's how I would normally like visualize. I don't know what you.
Yeah. Well,
what
actually,
you,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. I finished.
Yeah. So, because we just talked about the Navy, and you did mention, of course, the assault carriers. There's a couple questions that are, I think, interesting, right? Well, you mentioned here, a future episode on how a war over Taiwan might look. But there's two things I think we can ask right now. One of the things that I've, in my studies, right, not only do the assault carriers, but there's actually like specially designed barges where the Chinese have bridges that they'll extend the bridge over like the beach, up to some distance so that tanks and vehicles can drive on that suspension bridge over the beach as far as possible, and then into some area that's suitable for mechanized warfare. But those are, of course, very vulnerable if not properly defended and escorted. What would a Chinese amphibious operation look like protecting those transport barges with bridges?
I would say those barges are very specific to the Taiwan scenario because basically I would say that any landing operation will not happen unless everything in Taiwan has already, any military infrastructure and target on the island has already been wiped out. And because Taiwan is so close, that rocket launcher, like multiple rocket launchers from the mainland, can already reach Taiwan. So I would say, like in the war with Taiwan, the Navy will not play a big role. Basically, just the Air Force and the land-based short, like a rocket, just targeting everything. That would be and then after everything has been wiped out, then they land. There will not be like any assault on the beach. And what's gonna go first is still gonna be like unmanned platform first. But I would say, taking a step back, I would say like a much more likely scenario would be just like a blockade, because Taiwan actually is not food sufficient, and you need natural gas for electricity. So basically, I think the most likely scenario, if the mainland actually make a move on Taiwan, is basically just block all entrance and exit and just do a complete blockade. And after a few months, and they're probably just gonna surrender.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is important to ask, right? Because if you watch Western strategic analysis of a hypothetical Chinese invasion of Taiwan. They're going to assume, and I've watched these presentations, so I know they're going to assume that these landing barges would be sent in before the mines are, well, some mines would be cleared, but before the Taiwanese defense forces are sufficiently degraded to avoid any retaliatory strikes. But what you're saying is they're not going to do that. They're going to flatten and degrade Taiwan's ability to fight first, and then, if required, send in the barges. Basically, there's no risk of retaliation at that point.
Yeah, I would say like that's any general with half a brain would do. But I feel like a lot of those analysts and video they're more like for hype than actual actual real analysis. Because if you think about it, the best strategy you first do a blockade because that way you minimize your loss. And if you have to get on it, you have to like make sure to really reduce the enemy ability to fight back to the minimum. I mean, in a war, it's not like a video game. You don't like prepare to like the ultimate battle. You just get it done with the minimal loss as possible, right?
Yes, yes. The other thing with was it oh yeah, the other thing you didn't cover directly, but as a prelude to an invasion of Taiwan, how would China detect and neutralize sea mines?
That I don't know too deep into it, but China does have ships that specialize in this kind of thing. And also, I would say like the likelihood of sea mine is getting much lower now because recently there was actually a lot of things that happened around Taiwan, but it didn't got much of a coverage in Western media. Is that basically since the last couple of months, Taiwan basically lost control of its waters uh, because there was, I think, last year, Taiwanese Coast Guard kind of killed the Chinese fishermen, and the mainland basically used that as an excuse to basically send in the Coast Guard of the mainland and basically took control of the Taiwanese waters. So now the Taiwanese warship doesn't dare to come out. The Taiwanese Coast Guard doesn't need to to get out. Basically, what the the Taiwanese control is basically limited to the 12 nautical mile of waters, and everything outside is already in control of the Chinese Coast Guard, which sometimes actually go into the 12 nautical mile to arrest and they give warning to Taiwanese fishermen, which now need to get registered in the mainland. So this is like a big development that not many Western media covered.
Okay. Rucker Deepness has rephrased this question. He said, cost compared to a fleet carrier, more expendable, similar to ships designed to manage seaplanes and submarines in World War II.
Fleet carrier is it basically like an escort carrier or?
Well, no. So his original question was, do escort/assault carriers serve a similar role to float planes and submarines in terms of footprint? And he explains footprint by meaning expendable. Right, a submarine is more expendable than an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I would say that they're all expendable. The escort carrier they will be as expendable as a frigate, and I would say the assault carrier will probably comparable to a destroyer or a cruiser in terms of expendability. So basically, you now have like three tier of carrier instead of just like one big carrier.
Right. Okay, we have another question, I think, for you. This is a bit of a long one. Imperator of Forge. YouTube channel City Crusher has discussed at length the lack of interest in Chinese women to marry except at a very high price on the part of the men. The one-child policy of China has ensured a gender disparity for China. The Chinese are going through a population implosion, as Peter Zeihan has postulated and shown with various graphs. The Chinese lack the manpower for long-term projection of naval power. So what would you say to that?
I would say that Navy doesn't really require that much a mass of people. It requires highly skilled people, and in China, the military are paid very well. So I don't think that's the bigger issue because let's be frank. The Navy is pretty much a very small percentage of the Chinese population, and I will also say that uh, China is also the country that is automating one of the fastest. I would say like if you check the statistic, over half of all industrial robots are currently being installed in China. So I don't think a drop in population are really gonna affect China. It's gonna affect, but not to the extent that people think. But I would say like yeah, Chinese women are quite difficult to deal with, and I don't really like to deal with them. Yeah,
Not very ethno nationalist of you, Rainlord.
no, pretty much. I will. Oh yeah, I think I would say the story that I told you in our private chat. Do you remember what I told you? What's the advantage of dating someone outside of your own culture slash race?
Yeah, you said that you could, when you made a mistake socially, you could say it was based on your ethnicity.
Yeah, they're gonna give the benefit of the doubt. I actually feel like dating someone of the different culture actually has this advantage, so you can get away with more shit.
No, yeah. So, no more questions. Let me see if I have any
Yeah,
more questions for you, though.
yeah.
Okay, so from what you said, oh, you didn't mention submarines at all. Is there anything you want to say about submarines?
Oh yes. I didn't mention submarine. Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. I actually didn't think I'll have the time to talk about submarine. That's why I didn't make this part. But I don't think submarine is gonna be very much more in terms of a revolutionary change. They're just gonna get quieter, and with and that's mostly it. But they will have a greater reliance on, like attack submarine. It also have a vertical launch system, right?
Uh,
Like vertical launch tubes.
you mean like the Soviet Oscar launching cruise missiles?
Yeah. I think like the cruise missiles, they will have like a greater reliance on cruise missile because that gives them a much greater range. And if you go further back in the presentation, the missile, the YJ-19. If you go
Mhm.
back,
Oh, yeah. Let's go back.
yeah, and the missiles.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, the YJ-19 is a scramjet missile. A lot of people suspect, since it's narrower than the YJ-17 and 20, a lot of people suspect that maybe it's a submarine missile. It's basically, it launches. The submarine doesn't do the target. It basically just launch, and the missile by satellite, was guided by other aircraft or ship, will just go and get the target. So that's, I would say, like a new ability that submarine is going to have. But they're still going to do mostly the job they do before. They're going to defend against other submarines, and they may carry unmanned mini sub, but that's mostly it. So I don't think there will be any revolutionary change to submarines.
Okay, so to sort of like summarize everything that you've said as a sort of like Chinese strategy, right? So the land-based hypersonic missiles provide a kind of area denial system, ability to target enemy ships and emplacements on islands. They're backed up by a land-based air force, which is the core is the bomber fleet. Then the Chinese fleet itself, the core is the supercarrier with the sixth generation fighters controlling the loyal wingman drones. They're in turn surrounded by missile boats and escort carriers, which are drone carriers. Probably also has submarines involved as well, and they would be used to target American naval vessels. And then the assault carriers would be used for any landings. Is that broadly correct?
Yeah, that's broadly correct. But I will also add that the main strategic location that Chinese Navy is seeking to control is actually the Indian Oceans, not the Western Pacific. And the other point I will add is that those assault carriers, they will be more targeted against like if there's if both US and China is going to take some island, for example, in the middle Indian Ocean or in the middle Pacific. So they will be more involved once you're outside of the influence of land-based air force.
Oh, also, you mentioned in the Indian Ocean. Also, I think China is building a naval base in Cambodia, right?
Oh yes, and there's also one in Pakistan. Yeah, watch the Indian Ocean. That's actually the what China consider to be the strategic importance. In the West Pacific, China just want to keep the U.S. out, but it's really the Indian Ocean that China is trying to control.
So basically, if I'm reading this right, Africa is where the economic development is, and China wants to ensure it has access to those markets by controlling the Indian Ocean.
Also, the Middle East.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, also the Middle East.
So this is basically the 15th century treasure fleet strategy all over again.
This I wasn't fully aware of it. Yeah, my historical knowledge is not that much the best.
Well, in the 15th century, during the height of the Ming Dynasty, and I used to read about this because I loved reading about naval exploration. And China, what it's most known for is the great treasure fleet that circled the Indian Ocean. Some people speculate that it might have come to North America. Highly speculative, but I read some books on that. So that was an interesting deep dive in the past. But also, let's see, record deepness in Imperial Forge. Thank you for your answer. So I think you did a good job on that. So before we wrap up, Rain, is there anything that you want to leave us with? And where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. If they have any questions, they can either write a comment or DM me. And if if you have any question, you can leave a comment on the video, and I'll periodically come back and check and answer them.
Well, all right. Thank you, Rain. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
This is Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.